Hi, I'm Chet Marchwinski, Communications Director at the nonprofit Lean Enterprise Institute. And today my guest is Zack Rosenburg. He is CEO of SBP, a nonprofit national disaster relief organization that he co-founded in 2006 with his then-girlfriend Liz McCartney when they spent 2 weeks volunteering in New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina. Frustrated by the inefficiency and slow progress of the traditional rebuilding process, Zack and Liz left their Washington, D.C. careers as an attorney and teacher, respectively, to start SBP. Using lean management principles that they learned from Toyota, SBP now builds high-quality homes faster and cheaper than market rates and is recognized as a leader in disaster recovery. Liz and Zack describe in detail this revolutionary SBP approach to rebuilding in their new book, Getting Home, Rebuilding Communities Faster and Stronger. Zack, thanks very much. Congratulations on the book, and thanks very much for coming in and telling us about not just the book, but the good work of SBP.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you again.
And so what's the problem with the the traditional disaster recovery process?
So before we talk about what the problem with disaster recovery process, I think it's important to put it in context about why every American should care. Sure. So today's Thursday, I guess, of the week. On Monday, the National Weather Service came out and said that during this flood season, over 200 million homes are at risk of catastrophic flooding in relation to the Mississippi River flooding and the storms that are predicted to come. So this is a real American problem. Last year, 50% of American counties were impacted by a federally declared natural disaster. Another example, if people think, well, I'm not in a mandatory flood zone. In Houston, 70% of the homes that flooded after Hurricane Harvey were not in a required flood insurance zone.
Wow.
So before we get to the what's wrong with it, I want to make sure your folks know this relates to everybody. Disaster recovery in America needs to be improved because it doesn't measure what matters. Outputs aren't measured. Results aren't measured. What happens, unfortunately, is a focus on compliance and process. And so you can say success is driving certain outcomes or success is following the process. And for a host of reasons, in disaster recovery, success is measured by have you followed the process.
And the process for tearing down homes or applying for money, getting relief?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of government funds involved. And of course, there has to be compliance and there can't be waste. We believe that the federal systems need to put an equal emphasis on outcomes and outputs and getting money out the door as there is on ensuring that our taxpayer dollars, rightly so, are stewarded properly.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me go to ask you more about that. In Getting Home, you and Liz talk about how you got to New Orleans, but this isn't just, it's a great story, it's inspiring, but it's not a feel-good book. You've got a blueprint in there, a 9-step process on how to reform at all levels, how government at all levels can work together, state, federal, local, how relief agencies can work better together, charities can work better together. Can you summarize that process?
Well, let me tell you, I think from the beginning, maybe this story is a nice story. Hopefully it's a story that gives people hope about what they can do themselves and is empowering. I mean, how ludicrous is it that a teacher and a lawyer created a disaster construction group that started doing a ton of disaster construction, so it should empower people, but or feel good. And it shows the true American connectivity that folks will help folks that have never met before. But there's a lot of feel-good stories. What we really want is a book that citizens, business leaders, government employees can have a roadmap towards how to drive impact and change and improvement wherever they work and wherever they live. And we see this as a feel-good business book, and we want this to be a business book.
That's right. That's a good point, because you talk in the book a lot about how you've worked with private business, and they're involved in disaster recovery a lot of times. So this is a business lesson.
This is a business book. We want this book to go to business schools, to graduate programs, undergraduate programs, and to make it into boardrooms of both for-profit companies and nonprofit companies. We think some of the lessons that we share about investing in people and having an identity at work, certainly the TPS piece of understanding ahead of or behind and talking about problems, these can be applied to anything, not just the disaster world.
That's right. To pick up on that, there's a lot of lessons, good business lessons in there for managing people.
I think so.
For instance, the volunteer, you work with a lot of volunteers from AmeriCorps, and you had to come up with a process where your workforce is literally turning over every so many days, 60 or 90 days.
Yeah.
So you had to come up with a way to train people and bring them up to speed. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think the managers and leaders out there would want to know.
Yeah, so whether it's our 1 day or 1 week volunteers, an AmeriCorps program NCCC that stays for about 6 weeks, or an AmeriCorps program that stays for 10 months, we have quite a bit of turnover. And we could either be held captive by that turnover, or we could leverage it. We try and see it as an asset. And so at SBP, our AmeriCorps members are constantly making our systems and processes better. We have this ethos at SBP called constructive discontent that's owned by everybody. And so rather than focus, here is how we do it because we've always done it that way, we certainly have systems and processes, but our team understands that it's their job to improve them. And so rather than being held captive by turnover, we embrace it. And we do some interesting things. We focus on culture. We focus on values. We focus on this notion of the seeking system, which, you guys can Google what it is, but it's a dopamine trigger that's activated when folks are learning and thinking and pursuing. And so at SBP, we really believe that we want to tap into innate and physical human characteristics to drive impact. And so the seeking system is a big piece of that, too.
Well, SBP is certainly making an impact on improving disaster recovery. So why don't you tell folks how they can get involved with SBP if they want to?
Thanks. So we are building in 10 communities across the country, including Puerto Rico and Texas, Florida, the Carolinas. You can come out and volunteer. Second, we need donations, and people can invest, and those dollars will go directly to helping American families move home. Third, we have resources that help folks understand and mitigate risk. For businesses, these are resources that will augment and buttress business continuity plans by focusing on the potential soft spot, which is employee resilience. Employees can't come to work if they don't have a clear pathway home. Our website, so where you can really learn more about SBP, is www.sbpusa.org.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ted,
Hey,
for coming in. Good luck with the book, and thanks for telling us something about how SBP is making a difference.
Hey, I appreciate you.
Okay.
Thanks.
And thanks for watching. As Zach mentioned, you can learn more about SBP and get involved with the organization at sbpusa.org. And by getting a copy of Getting Home, it's a good story, it's an inspiring story, but more important, it's a practical one, a good business book that details an innovative 9-step blueprint for how private industry, relief agencies, volunteers, and all levels of government can work together to dramatically shrink the time between when disasters hit and when victims get home in a prompt, efficient, predictable way. Getting Home is available at lean.org. Thank you.